Sorry, I haven't done that. Well, apparently we're live. Could I welcome you to today's meeting and a bit of housekeeping. I'm Councillor Madden, Chair of this committee, and I'd like to draw your attention to the following. Safety information. If the continuous fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the room and public gallery by the stairwells. Do not attempt to use the lifts. Please assemble by Queen Victoria statue in Guildhall Square. In order to comply with the Guildhall Trust Fire Marshal regulations, if you sign into the Guildhall, please remember to sign out when you leave the building after today's meeting. Live web streaming. May I draw everyone's attention to the fact that this meeting will be live streamed and that the camera zooms in to show the speaker. This system is linked to the microphones, therefore can I please remind all attendees to turn the microphones on to speak and then off again once you have finished speaking. Members of the public are also permitted to record the meeting on the understanding that it neither disrupts the meeting nor records those stating explicitly that they do not wish to be recorded. Please be advised that the public seating area is not in view of the camera used to webcast this meeting. And then I'll go around and do some introductions, if that's okay. Let's start, Helen.
Helen Dickerson, Deputy Monitoring Officer.
David White, External Audit Manager for Ernst & Young.
James Harris, Senior Local Democracy Officer.
Paul Somerset, Deputy Chief Internal Auditor.
Elizabeth Goodwin, Chief Internal Auditor.
Kelly Nash from Strategy Unit.
Helen Magri, Data Protection Officer.
Richard Locke, Assistant Director for Procurement.
Councillor Stuart Brown from Fratton Ward.
Councillor Benedict Swan from Copner Ward.
Councillor Judith Smythe from St Jude Ward.
Michael Lloyd, Finance Manager for Technical and Financial Planning.
Steve Belshaw, Group Accountant and Technical and Financial Planning.
And Julian Pike, Deputy Director of Finance.
I almost forgot you. Yeah, thank you all very much. We have two apologies for absence today. Councillor Weems and Councillor Ashmore, which was very late. Something's happened today with them, so there'll be no deputy in this place. Item 2, members. Declaration of members' interests. Anybody? No, thank you. Can we go to the minutes of the 25th of January for accuracy and matters arising, please? I'll do the big numbers. Page 7, page 8, page 9, page 10. Hello.
It says that we ask for an update on the evidence of GBS certificates. Is that on the agenda?
Hopefully it is. Lizzie?
No, we will actually be performing the review, so it will be the very next meeting.
It hasn't been lost. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, Lizzie, I didn't hear you. Sorry, did you?
It's not lost. The implementation dates we haven't gone past yet, but by the time we have the next meeting, we would have done, and then we will follow up again then.
Thank you. Page 11. Page 12. Is that okay, members? Can we agree that those is a true record? Yeah? Okay, I'll sign the minutes. Thank you very much. Item 4 is Kelly with the annual governance statement. Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you, Chair. The committee's report comes each year as an accompaniment to the statement of accounts. The background and function are set out in section 3 in the report, but in essence, the annual governance statement describes the systems and processes that are in place to ensure the council business is conducted lawfully and in accordance with proper standards. The report includes the annual opinion of effectiveness of the system of internal control by the Chief Internal Auditor and identifies areas of development in the organisational and governance framework set out at page 36 in the wider agenda pack. The committee have previously seen and commented on an advanced draft of this document, and any comments have been reflected in the body of the report. I think that's all I want to say by way of introduction. Happy to take any questions and comments, Chair.
Judith, Councillor Smythe.
This is a very general comment. It's an excellent report as usual. I really enjoy this report. I may just have forgotten what we did last year and the previous years, but all of these things are a year old, aren't they? 21, 22. I seem to remember we were having these earlier in the year in the past, because actually it is quite dated now, as you'd expect, because we've done a lot in the last year. Is it always now that we have this, or is it usually a bit earlier? And the same goes for the accounts as well and the audit. It feels everything's a bit late.
It looks all the same to me, but Kelly, I'm not sure. We've got a report.
I think Jules can comment on this one.
Yeah.
I think the simple answer is yes, it is late. We would normally have brought this to you when this time for the 2021 cycle. We brought it to you in November.
Yeah, that's what
but for reasons that will probably become apparent during the next item, is the audit is later this year. And as a consequence of that, because this annual governance statement accompanies a statement of accounts, because the statement of accounts approval at this committee has been pushed back, so therefore has the approval of this particular government statement been pushed back. But I would hope in future years it's not as late as it is, but the way things are going, it possibly could be as late as this again next year, but we'll see.
And I'm sure it's not outside regulations, is it? But
no, it's not, no.
But I'm glad. I feel my memory has been good. I wasn't having a brain slip.
Chair, might I just add that obviously the draft did come much earlier. So again, it's probably not necessarily as familiar because it was quite some months ago that we bought the advanced draft. I think we'll also probably should flag that we'll be starting obviously the cycle for the next one.
Yeah.
Very soon, and
Good.
actually the draft, as usual, comes sort of very early in the next municipal year. So, exactly as Jules said,
I
hopefully
don't
we
think I
won't
was
see a
at the
similar
meeting when we
situation.
had the draft, and I've only missed one, if any, of these meetings. So I don't know when it was. Can you remember when?
I want to say, and I will double check. I want to say it would have been round about the July meeting, which is when we usually do that.
Okay, it's possible. I definitely only missed one of these, but might have been that one. Thank you. I had a couple of... Go on, Chair. I'll find the couple of matters I was going to raise.
Yeah, when we're looking at the significant governance issues for 22-23, and it's just that, so we're looking at page 36 onwards, I think. What came out to me when I was reading it was, I mean, it's fine, except I don't know what happens in the sense that if we take two, IT resilience, I'm just saying as an example, and then it's ongoing development and review. Now, is that back to the Director of Corporate Services, or you know what I mean? It's so that goes on forever until we decide to change the system. Is that really what's happening?
I think in reality, a number of these, the particular flavour of the issue might change year on year. But actually, that issue around our ongoing IT resilience and adaptability is an issue that we are keeping an eye on a constant rolling basis, really, as systems become more sophisticated and as an organisation we become more reliant on that IT capability. So I think a previous annual governance statement picked up the particular issue around emergency readiness. That was addressed, that's moved on, but actually there are further things that we're now looking to strengthen as we move to sort of more cloud-based working, etc. So I think you're right to pick up that it does feel like it's there forever. I think the particular nature of the issue that we're looking at changes, but there is a broad theme there that we do continue to work on. I think similarly, one of the ones that's not there, I don't think this time around, I'm not going to check before I say that, but was very long-standing for a long time, was around our compliance with information governance regulation, because again, for a long time, there was a series of changes which made the particular issue we were looking at different, but the broad theme around information governance and compliance with those regulations featured on here for a number of years, until we're at a point where actually it probably feels that, yes, it is something we're doing, but it probably doesn't have the immediate flavour that we have included this year. That's not to say we can come back. So, yes, some of these things probably do feel like they're quite ongoing, but that's probably right, given that they are significant to the way we organise ourselves.
Yeah, I was wanting to know, there's a report going back somewhere on some sort of basis, whether it's regular or twice a year or yearly or whatever. A report is going back, presumably, to or by the lead officer. I'm not sure where it's going. That's really what my question was, Kelly.
Yeah, and previously we did almost do a bit of a stock take check on some of the sort of issues in the sort of middle of the year. And I think, again, as Councillor Smythe says, as timescales have kind of started to compress about it, that's become a bit more challenging. But maybe that's something we look to do, is almost a bit of a review back on the issues as much as a forward look of them. We can certainly take that away and do something, because it's what we do as part of the preparation anyway. We maybe just haven't presented it back. So I think that's a helpful comment, and we'll certainly bring something back.
Okay, thank you, Kelly. Did you remember your question?
I did.
Okay, carry on.
Page 23 or 35. It says we're aiming to be working as a hybrid organisation by summer 2022. I had two questions. Did that happen? And second of all, I think the use of the word hybrid organisation is I didn't really understand it to start with. I sort of had to think through why you meant hybrid in the sense of some working at home, some working, but actually a hybrid organisation could have been a merger with Gosport or something. It's, you know, and I know I didn't understand it when I first read it.
Yeah, the interpretation around it being a combination of flexible working, desk-based,
Understand
home-based,
that,
that's the correct one, yeah.
I think I would have used a different word to describe it. The other thing is I mean, there are some tantalising glimpses into the future in this that we now know. You say there's some doubt about the government funding or even wanting to fund the, what's it called, the customs point in the port, and now we kind of seem to be resigned to them not even paying at all. I think that makes the fact that this is out of date, because it makes it, seeing as it'll go out in the public domain now, it makes it, I think, less useful than it might be.
Yeah, no, I don't necessarily disagree. I think probably the one comment I made, this kind of a snapshot report that brings things together, and I think all of those issues are being progressed within their various fora as well. So I don't think it should be assumed that there's no action being taken in response to any of these things on an ongoing basis. It just sort of brings it together. But yeah, absolutely take the point that, yes, the timescales are just probably not as helpful as they may have been in the past.
I mean, I think these are really useful reports, and certainly I always highlight them to my group and to new councillors who are hoping to get elected. But it becomes less useful now because it's in the public domain. It will now because it's a year out of date. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions or points, members? No? Okay, thank you. I'm going to ask members to agree the...
Chair?
Hello, sorry.
Chair.
Oh, Lizzie.
Sorry, can I just double check? Are the accounts being signed off today? Okay, if they're being signed, the annual governance statement can't be totally signed off until external audit have signed off the accounts, so it can be signed off in principle pending any final alterations. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So you might need to tweak your wording.
Yes, I think it would be best to tweak the wording so that that is signed off on the basis that the external auditors have approved those accounts.
Okay.
If it helps, Chair, in the statement of accounts recommendations, there's a delegation paragraph in there that delegates to you. I wonder if that similar wording should be applied to the recommendation in this report as well.
That should be fine.
Is it okay, members? Yeah. Thank you, Lizzie, for upsetting the apple cart. But as well be right now. So if we put in delegation to it's not only me, is it? It's Chris Ward and people, isn't it? Yeah. If any change is necessary, is that okay? So we'll add that to that. Okay. In that case, then, with that amendment, can we agree the whatever it's called, the annual governance statement? I agree. Kelly, thank you very much. I'm with Judith. I mean, it's very readable. It's one of the ones I didn't fall asleep on. And it is, and it's and it runs well and it does well. And I know you've not messed about with it, but you've had a good look at it because we had a chat several months back. And thank you for a much better report. We keep improving all the time, which is good. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Could we note the fact that we have noticed these are all a bit late this year, and if they can be expedited, then it would be really helpful.
We could do that, couldn't we, James? Just say reports like this, if they could come early in the year, would be. I know we've got to get a report a year, at least one, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, and again, perhaps it would be useful because it was rolled forward from the previous meeting when it was prepared, but obviously needed to be kept current and to come forward. But certainly, maybe what we would do is bring further drafts, so we're at least keeping the information live with the committee, and maybe that will mean you're again even more familiar with the material at the point that it comes for approval than may have been otherwise. So again, we'll look at that next year.
I think that would be useful. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Sorry,
So as you say, our report today is our 21-22 audit results report. So I'll talk through mainly sections 1 and 2 and attempt to sort of address some of those points around timing as well as part of doing that. So looking first at section 1, the executive summary, which starts substantively on page 7 per the big page numbers. So there are elements of the audit which remain ongoing. The report, therefore, today is reporting as much as we possibly can in terms of the current status and outcomes of the audit. We will then finalise the report and circulate a further version once we get to that stage. The main areas which are ongoing are shown then in the status of the audit section on page 7. And the first two of those are really sort of key in terms of, the wider question around the timing of when certain reports are coming to the committee, the delay in the approval of the statement of accounts this year. The first of them is the testing of valuations of property, plant and equipment and investment property. This is an area of work where I think we've debated previously the sort of rights or wrongs of the degree of focus that we have to place on these valuations in a public sector context, but nevertheless it's something which remains an area of key focus for the regulator when auditors' files are reviewed, and it's something where the bar kind of just increasingly moves upwards in terms of the level of audit work and audit evidence that's required to substantiate these valuations in the accounts. We have encountered some issues this year with the availability of supporting evidence for some of the inputs into valuations and some methodological issues within some of the valuations which weren't identified through the review process in the property team. That is reported in section 7 of the report. We do appreciate, though, that, as I say, the level of work we undertake in this area is high, the amount of evidence that we have to request is large, and that there have been some turnover within the valuations team which has impacted their ability to provide some explanations for some of the valuations in our samples. The second issue is the completion of work on infrastructure assets. This was discussed at some length when we presented the audit plan. This is a national issue, so it's not specific to Portsmouth or to Ernst & Young. Which came about through one of the other audit firms, I think, raising a technical query with the National Audit Office, and it sort of went from there. Became sort of clear that the way in which infrastructure assets were being recorded and accounted for, in some instances, wasn't wholly compliant with the code, but that was a very common issue. It took a long time to sort of get to a point where a statutory instrument was issued and an amendment was made to the Code of Practice to enable the issue to effectively be overcome for the purposes of the 21-22 accounts. And again, I'll talk a bit more about that when we get to section 2 of the report. There are ongoing capacity constraints on our side, and because of the time taken to get through some of those aspects of the work, it then means that we don't have immediate availability of resource to come back onto the audit to complete the work when we get to that stage. And we've spoken before in previous meetings, I think, about the general sort of constraints on public sector audit and the capacity therein, which, whilst we are proactively taking steps to improve, and we've got a big sort of recruitment drive going on at the moment, the effect of that will be seen in the medium term rather than, having been something that we can call on immediately at the moment. There are then some other areas outstanding as shown there, and there is some of the review of the file yet to be completed as well. Any issues which emerge from that will be included in the final version of this report. The second set of bullet points are things which would be done just as standard at the end of the audit in any given year. On the point around whole of government accounts, we don't expect to have to do any substantive work on the whole of government accounts for the NAO for Portsmouth because you are below their threshold. But again, nevertheless, they withhold the right to come back and ask us to do additional procedures for any entity which is below that threshold and have not yet said which ones they will pick or when, which will mean that even when the audit opinion is issued, the certificate will likely have to remain open until they've clarified that point. Moving on then to page 8. So our value for money work is well progressed. No weaknesses in arrangements have been identified to date, and the final position will be confirmed in the final version of the report. There are no unadjusted audit differences to date or adjusted differences above our performance materiality threshold, which we would need to report to you. Some disclosure misstatements have been amended within the accounts, and those were discussed at the accounts briefing. We do expect there to be some audit differences arising from the work on valuations, but until that's fully completed, it's not possible to give a full list of those or to confirm whether they would remain adjusted or unadjusted, because there's a consideration around their cumulative value which would need to be taken once they are all finalised. On page 9, so our work on the annual governance statement is completed subject to review with no issues to report. I've already mentioned the issue which is in section 7 around the control observations. Moving on then to section 2 of the report, which is the areas of risk and audit focus. I'll just briefly talk to each of these. So these are the areas of risk which are identified in our audit plan. The first of these is the risk of misstatement due to fraud or error, otherwise sometimes called the risk of management override of controls. This is a risk identified on all audits under the ISA, so it's not to say this is something specific to Portsmouth City Council. Our work on journals testing remains subject to completion, but no indications of management override or fraud identified through the work completed to date. The next risk on big page 14 is the risk of fraud in revenue and expenditure recognition. Again, a risk which is required to be identified under the ISAs on all audits. In the public sector context, we've identified the potential risk of inappropriate capitalisation of revenue expenditure, e.g. moving costs out of the revenue budget onto the balance sheet. We test that by looking at additions to property, plant and equipment and the classification of expenditure as REVCAS. That work is completed with no issues to report. The last of the fraud risks is on page 15. This is another risk around revenue and expenditure recognition. This one is on trading and investment property income. That's been identified because that's a, in inverted commas, sort of commercial source of income, not a local government specific one. So we've tested those income streams using lower thresholds and larger sample sizes. And again, there are no matters to report from that work. The next sort of 3 risks are all those which are to do with property valuations, so that I won't say any more on those at the moment. That work is well progressed but remains subject to completion. That then takes me to page 19, which then we're moving into our inherent risks, so not significant, but areas of audit focus. The first of those is the pension liability valuation, which we identify in every year. That work is complete subject to review with no matters to report. Then we have on page 20 accounting for COVID-19 related grants. There are judgments to be taken in terms of how these are accounted for and how they're therefore reflected in the statement of accounts. This risk was also in the previous year. And we've tested those again using lower thresholds, and we're satisfied that there are, again, no matters to report in how those have been accounted for. Page 21, the Council's Group Accounts Assessment. So we review this annually as well, looking at the assessment made as to whether the council should be consolidating any of its subsidiary entities into its statement of accounts. And again, we have agreed with the council's judgment that that is not necessary for 21-22. It's something that we will keep under review going forwards, especially with the sort of increase in activity of some of the council's subsidiary companies. Page 22, so again there was a small reorganisation of the council's departmental structure within 21-22. What that means under the SIPFA code is that some of the main statements and notes within the accounts have to be restated to reflect those reporting structures. So the council made some restatements to its comprehensive income and expenditure statement, expenditure funding analysis and some of the supporting notes. We've reviewed those and again there are no matters to report. On page 23, the council introduced a new ledger system at the commencement of the accounting year. So we've undertaken some work to review the transfer of balances across to that system and to understand the processes that were undertaken to review the transfer. And again, there are no matters to report. Transfer was complete and accurate. And then I think the last one is on pages 24 and 25, which is the infrastructure assets issue. This should be shown as a significant risk rather than an area of audit focus, which it is on page 25. So I talked about this one a bit already, and we talked about it in the meeting where the plan was presented, and Chris gave some quite helpful examples of sort of what it means. Say the national position has moved on since then, such that the guidance and statutory instrument that have been issued since mean that the way that these have been accounted for in 21-22 is acceptable. It's more now about looking at how to move to a position when the effectiveness of those instruments expires to be able to account for these accurately at that point in time. That's probably what I would say by way of sort of talking to the report. Happy to try to take any questions. Obviously, my director, Andrew, is not here today, so if there are any I can't answer, I'll take them away and we'll respond in writing afterwards.
Yeah, David, thanks very much for that. And of course, as I said, the report, you did do the updates that it said. There was only one thing that really, well, several things. The one thing on page 25 and the infrastructure assets, and at the bottom is a recommendation. Develop more granular accounting records or whatever, right? Is that recommendation to this committee or is it to the Section 151 officer?
It's more to the Section 151 officer / the finance team, yeah.
Page 27, the very last sentence just jumped out at me because what's happening at all authorities. Because all future events or conditions because not all can be predicted, this statement sort of guarantees the authority's ability to continue as a going concern. Is that a general statement that are going in council reports all over the country?
Yes, it is. Any EY report would include that wording because the wording of our audit report is tightly prescribed. We follow a template that's issued centrally, and we're really not allowed to kind of tailor the content of almost any of it. So yes, it would be. It's not specific to this council.
It's a just in case. Okay, thank you. Any questions, members? Councillor Smythe-Judith, please.
Thank you for that. If I understand this right, you're waiting for valuations to come in, and that's delaying the report. This is the section about, our work on property, plant and equipment valuations is in progress. But there's also another one about, I mean, this is clearly marked as an audit of the year ended 31st of March 2022. You have all the results. You know what was happening in that year. I don't understand why you're still waiting for those particular things. Because the particular things happened in the subsequent year.
Apologies. It's not that the evaluations themselves haven't been completed. It's that there are numerous inputs and judgments involved in each individual property valuation. We then, because of the level of sort of assigned risk, that drives the sample sizes that we have to select from those balances, which therefore means that the samples that we select in that area of the audit are large. And say, back in years past, the bar was much lower in terms of the level of work that we would have done on each of those individual valuations. Because of the way things have moved on since then, we're required to obtain evidence and explanations for pretty much every input into those valuations. And that takes time, and there has been a long sort of iterative process, mainly between our audit lead senior and members of the valuations team, with this assistance which we've gratefully received from finance officers as well. But it remains the case that there are elements of those valuations which we haven't yet been able to fully substantiate, and there have been some, methodological issues which are close to having been agreed now with the valuations team. But I don't disagree, that process has taken longer than we would have liked it to, and in future years we'd certainly hope to be able to complete it more quickly.
So you're only using the valuations from the relevant year, are you? Is that right?
That is correct, yes.
It reads as if you're looking at valuation information from this year rather than the year that the audit is for.
Apologies, I'll look at the way it's worded, but no, you are right, it is as at the 31st of March 22.
Okay, I know you shouldn't need to say that, but this in here it looks like that. And of course a lot's happened in the property market in the last year, which shouldn't really be taken into account in this audit. So perhaps if you could clarify that, I'd be very grateful.
We'll look to clarify that in the final version.
The other thing is I just want to come back, Chair, to the overall business of the lateness of this. If I recall, it used to be the convention that the external audit was completed by the 31st of September, and then people had an AGM, and then they could move on. And I know that when interviews are done for auditors, the speed of getting things done is taken into account. I'm really quite worried about this being late, and I'm worried that it might be a relic of COVID that we don't like, that people got all sorts of excuses for delaying things in the future, and I would like to place on record my concern for that. I think the appropriate time to do this is not after we've agreed the budget for next year, which is where we are now, but is halfway through the year. And maybe some things could happen earlier if you know you've got to get information that's difficult to get. So I just want to place on record the fact that I am quite, as you can see, quite concerned about this ongoing extension of the time this is taking. I mean, maybe we need to, when we next tender, we need to specify more people in the team or whatever it is. But I am very concerned about it.
Well, thank you for that. Lucy?
I was just going to say there is a national reset, though, isn't there, on the time frame? Because whilst it was September, it has now moved to the end of November, and that was following a Redmond review. And that's not likely to move. I think there is recognition of problems across the whole of the country.
Gathered yet that, because I said it used to be, and certainly the organisations I've run, I hope we'd be trying for September, because it's a very good time to pause and review. November's fine if that's the national standard, but let's have November. It's March now.
You see what happens when you take a year off from the committee? Judith, everything changes. But I mean, I appreciate it.
Very kind, Chair.
I appreciate the report will come eventually. We've had problems in the past with it, and it doesn't. The only problem I've had in the past is, does it affect us as an authority? And I've had all sorts of assurance it doesn't. Okay, so I mean, nobody's going to tick boxes up. We're going to Whitehall or whatever they do. Yeah. David, anything you want to add?
Only that, and this doesn't necessarily kind of mitigate the situation specifically here, but that it's sort of, I just say that whether this is a good or a bad thing, but this is a situation which is impacting probably the majority of authorities. Certainly it's impacting all of the audit firms. As you say, there is an element of a hangover from COVID, but there is also the other elements around the availability of resource, the difficulty in recruiting public sector auditors, especially experienced people, and in retaining them, and the sort of cumulative effect that is having.
If I might say, Chair, that's exactly the sort of excuses that people are using in the NHS and other things. We can plan ahead, and we should plan ahead, and I really do believe we should go back to the November target because it makes the rest of our financial year planning much easier. We've already approved next year's budget, so we're kind of we're a whole cycle out, and when you're dealing with financial and other information on this side of on the councillor's side, you need to be able to manage the process in your mind, and I think this. I mean, yeah, we may. There's all sorts of things the country could do to put that right, and I won't go into any polemic discussions about that.
Okay, any other point questions? No, okay. I have to ask you, can we, I know the report's not complete, but the recommendation is that we note this report. Is that agreed? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. David, thank you very much. Again, nicely set out, easy to read report. Thank you. Can we move on to the statements of account, 21-22? I think Julian's going to do this. We did have, we had a briefing last week on it, just to see if members had any concerns they want to raise to be answered today. I mean, it wasn't to try to rehearse anything. So members did turn up. I don't know if you had any. Some members didn't turn up, Julian. I don't know if you've actually had anything from anybody in the meantime.
No questions have come to me, Chair.
Okay, so I'll just hand over to you, Julian, if that's okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Yes, this item follows on from the previous item, the audit results report, and this is in this item we're seeking the approval of this committee for the statement of accounts 21-22. Just to give a little bit of background, initial planning for the preparation of the 21-22 statements of accounts began in the autumn of 2021, with work commencing in earnest during March 2022. The accounts payable and receivable subledgers were closed at the 31st of March during the first week of April, and by the 11th of April, all the finance teams had completed the closure of their service revenue accounts, at which point Mike Lloyd and his team then take over the production of the statement of accounts, which are before you today, and Chris Ward, in his capacity of Section 151 officer, signed those draft accounts on the 25th of June 2022 and subsequently re-signed this latest version, which includes the correction of a number of typographical errors and 7 non-trivial amendments that we've agreed with our auditors. Alongside this work, the external auditors met with us in March 2022 to plan their visits and also begin their interim review in March 22, and then they returned in July 2022 to undertake the audit, which has resulted in the audit results report noted earlier on this agenda. On the 2nd of March, members of the Gas Committee received a presentation of a statement of accounts, and a copy of that presentation was circulated afterwards for information. During that presentation, and included within the report before you, members were advised of the 7 non-trivial changes to the statement of accounts that we've agreed with our auditors. Since that meeting, we've had no further non-trivial amendments, but I do need to draw your attention to a typing error on page 52 of the papers before you relating to note 30, officer remuneration band 65,000 to 69,000. The revised figure in that column should say 30, and the amendment figure should say 1. We've transposed the 2 numbers between the 2 columns, so apologies for that. Members are asked to approve the report and the recommendations in the covering report, which, as I say, are to approve the statement of accounts and also to provide a delegation to the chair of this committee to sign an amended 21-22 statement of accounts after the 8th of March, should that be required, following further comments by our external auditor. Thank you, Chair, and we'll be happy to take any further questions that you might have.
Okay, Julian, thank you very much for that. Quite a long report, and which I hope that we agree today. But any questions or points on this? No? Okay, thank you. It's quite a long report, but it's we've seen the type before, Julian, to be Oh, sorry. Thank you, Stuart. Thank you, Councillor Bryan. Is that agreed, members? Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Julian. Can we move on then to item 7, Treasury Management Policy? Michael.
Okay, thank you. The report lays out our Treasury Management Policy for 2023-24. It will be going on for Cabinet and Council for approval, and it's brought to this committee for your scrutiny. There are 3 changes from last year's policy. The first one is the inclusion of a liability benchmark, which is a graph on page 237, and is a requirement of the Code of Practice on Treasury Management. And what that graph shows you is our underlying need to borrow, which is shown by the lines, and the actual borrowing we got, which is shown by the bar graph. And you can see from the graph that at the moment we're under borrowed, but there's a lot of things in our capital programme which will mean that we will need to borrow some more in a few years' time. The second change to the policy really involves our borrowing strategy. For a number of years, interest rates were low, and we tended to borrow a little bit early because it ensured we got cheap finance to finance a capital programme. The state of the financial markets has now changed quite a lot, and you'll be aware that interest rates are much higher. So the new emphasis is really to do internal borrowing in the short term, which basically means instead of investing our surplus cash, we use it to fund capital expenditure. Effectively, we're borrowing from our earmarked reserves, and then in 2 or 3 years' time, we will go out and secure long-term borrowing. The financial markets can be volatile, and we will be monitoring them closely. And if interest rates suddenly go down for whatever reason that we don't currently anticipate, we may secure some more borrowing. And the third change is that we're proposing not to invest in banks which are 50 or more than 50% owned by governments that have a poor human rights record. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Michael. Yes, the issue of human rights has come up before, hasn't it? Both at Cabinet, I think, and here. So yes, it's good that that's been looked into. To make sure that we do what we need to do. This is going on to Council next week. Is that right? The whole you said, yeah.
That's correct. Yes.
Yeah. Michael, there was just one question here that jumped out at me, which is, I think I don't know if you've seen the report this year, but 1.4 talks about training members. And I don't know that we do have a training as such, in the sense that we have somebody who was, I think it's the same person every year, I'm not sure, comes along and trains us about audit. And then we try to do a bit of internal with standards and all the rest of it. Michael, is there anything, and I know, and I haven't seen a feedback yet, there's a what do we call it, training subgroup or something operating at the minute. And we'll see a report now. But is anything particular that although you've said it's SIF or whatever, is anything particular that you think we could add to members' training?
got to be honest, and I don't know whether Julian can help me, but I don't actually know. I mean, I know that the members are trained, but I don't know what the precise content of that training is.
Okay, fair enough. They get 2 bits of training. When you're a new member, you get an induction, and so you have with the Section 151 officer, and then there's the one which we do every year. Julian, yeah?
I think if members are interested to understand in a bit more detail how we manage our temporary surplus cash flows, then we can certainly include some slides in the Section 151's member induction, and if members would also like it to be added to the annual or very general availability of training for members, then yes, we could. We promise to limit it to a few slides, so we don't give you death by PowerPoint. But yeah, we can put some training in there that sets the context of what the cornerstones of the Treasury management, security, liquidity, and yield, and how important that is, and we can sort of lay out the main points of how the Treasury management policy functions to ensure that we have a proper risk-based approach to our Treasury management dealings.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, the more the better. The more training we get, the better. Councillor Smythe.
Since I've been on your representative on the Hampshire Pension Fund Board, I am staggered about how much training they have. I mean, there must be about 3 weeks' worth of days that you have to spend in front of the computer trying to answer all sorts of questions. I think that there are some wider lessons that we could have about, a lot of it's about making judgments about risk and about the sort of portfolio that ought to be held. And actually it's fascinating, but it's very, in comparison to what we're doing here, it's masses more. I think it would be quite useful to have a kind of refresher each year so you know what's changed in the external environment. Perhaps some sort of a bit of information from our peer group of local authorities about where we stand and what we're doing. But a further question is, now we're looking at governance, and it came up through the discussions about the Qatar as somewhere to invest temporarily, didn't it? Do we have an ESG policy generally on our investments? Because that's environment, social and governance. And we're talking about on the Hampshire Pension Fund almost every meeting. And there's a lot to learn about that and how to balance that with a very good return, which of course is our main duty. I would appreciate it if we could have some sort of review of the ESG status of our investments, even the overnight ones, as we did with governance. We, as a authority that's voted for zero carbon and has a climate policy, we should know exactly the percentage of our investments that are in good investments. The work on Hampshire Pension Fund has revealed quite a large percentage of our existing portfolios are in companies rated highly, both through self-declaration and moderation of that, as being pretty good ESG, and also yielding a high yield, which has got to do both. And I think we should be a bit more aware of that.
Yes, we do have an ESG filter on our investments where it's possible, because we do take account of ESG credit ratings from MSCI, and we don't invest with laggards. Exactly where we set the filter is very subjective, really.
Just quickly, the ESG part of the Treasury management policy that Mike's been referring to is laid out on 250 and 251 of your papers. And just to reinforce what Mike was saying there, our policy would only permit us to invest in those with a rating of either leader or average. So we can sort of say our strategy would be such that we would never be invested in the laggard. So to just try and give you a bit of reassurance about that all of our investments are ethical, rather than us investing in what would be described as laggards. Our policy already covers that, and we will only invest in leaders and average-rated ESGs.
I noticed that, but I think it's worthy of a short paper at some stage, just so we can focus in on that, because it's quite important. I mean, the reassurance is here, but you'd be probably glad to hear, as pensioners and future pensioners, that we go into it in a lot more detail than that on the Hampshire Pension Fund.
Yeah, thank you, David. James, did I finish this report off? Have I asked for the report to be noted, or am I clerk who can land at the minute? Is it done?
Thank you, Chair. So, well, if members have nothing
I
further to add,
hadn't
then
done it.
It's for noting here.
Okay,
It'll be considered at council next week.
Is that all right, members, to note? Members, I just want to get these two items out of the way, because I want to say thanks to Julian and to Michael. I knew, probably the same time as most of you did at the council meeting, that Julian was going. That's the first I'd heard of it. But when we were doing the briefing the other week, I heard that Michael is going as well. I was welcoming Michael back from his illness to be told that he's leaving us. And I just want to say, I shall miss you. And I mean that seriously, because, you know, your professionalism and dedication, both of you, has been tremendous over the years. And I don't know, we're going to need some very good people to fill your shoes, I have to say. So I'd like to place on record my thanks to you, and I hope that's agreed. Yeah. Okay, and thank you. And I mean it. Thank you very much, both. Thank you. Can we move on to item 8, Internal Audit Performance Status Report to 21st of February and Internal Audit Plan 23-24. Lucy.
Thank you, Chair. Can I take them one at a time, if that's okay? So the first one that's in front of you is the progress report. I'd like to say we're almost there. We are being impacted by work that is best placed within the audit service, but we should be online to complete the audit plan, the 21-22, probably come mid-April. We're being impacted by a number of investigations, but I will be talking to Section 151 regarding some current resourcing issues. In relation to audits that have been completed, they are contained within this report along with any follow-up work. You'll note that, again, there's a number of grants that have been audited during the course of the previous reporting period, and there has been some movement in the plan, predominantly actually to accommodate those particular grants. So, Chair, in relation to progress report, I wasn't going to go over anything else, but happy to answer any questions anybody may have on this particular report first.
Okay, thank you. I don't have any myself, I have to say, for a change. Any questions, members? No? No questions.
Wonderful. If I go on then to the second part.
Please.
We, during the last quarter, have various conversations with numerous parties to establish what we need to audit for the forthcoming year. So part of the 23-24 plan, you will see in front of you are a list of activities along with how they align to the corporate strategic risks and objectives of the organisation. The plan needs to come in front of you for your approval, and as you would have already noted within the progress report, any amendments to the plan will be flagged during the course of the year. So that plan is to seek your approval for the work that will commence come April. Again, Chair, happy to take any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much, Lizzie. Any questions or points on the second bit of the report? No? Thank you, members. I think that's the first time ever you haven't been asked a question. I'll have to ask several the next time. But look, so on that, what we do, can we we note the audit performance for 22-23 to 21st of Feb of this year. 2, the highlighted areas of concern in relation to audits completed from 21-22 audit plan, including follow-up work performed. And 3, approve the proposed internal audit plan for 23-24. Agreed? Yeah, thank you very much. That's agreed. Thank you. Can we move on to item 9 then? Data security breach report. Welcome back, Owen.
Thank you, Chair. So this is a report that comes to the committee twice a year now and serves to provide you with details of every data breach that's been reported, action that's been taken, and allows us to highlight some trends that might appear over the course of that previous 6 months. Gives you quite a bit of detail of the cause of breaches, a breakdown by directorate, and hopefully gives you a flavour of what's been happening. Although this appears to be a relatively high number of breaches over that period, none of them were serious enough to report to the Information Commissioner's offices in that period, and we carry out that assessment based on the likelihood of risk and the level of risk that might occur to any individual as a result of that breach. And that's in line with a matrix used by the NHS and recommended by the Information Commissioner's Office. So, happy to take any questions on the report if anybody has any.
Thank you, Helen. Nothing jumped out to me, I have to say, so I'm fine with it. But members, any questions or points? No, okay. We're asked to note this report. Is that okay? Shall we note it? Thank you very much. Thank you. Helen, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Item 10 is the appointment of independent persons. I don't think you need a big thing on this, Helen, but I'm going to hand over to you anyway.
Thank you. Independent persons are appointed for 3 years. Their function is to be consulted by the Council in issues regarding members' compliance of the Code of Conduct. There are currently 2 appointments that have come to the end of their 3-year term. Mr. John Young, who is willing to stand for reappointment, and Mr. Mark Walsh, who has decided to step down. And so the recommendations are in respect of those 2.
Thank you. This is going to Council next week as well. Can I just, again, and maybe it's my reading of it, but the procedure for appointment, so 6.2, an interview panel comprising the chair, vice chair, whatever, standards, together with one officer met to consider shortlisted applicants. I think that's a hangover from the last report. We haven't met yet. So I just think, James, do we need to send an amendment out in advance of next, just say it should be meet or will meet? Yeah? We haven't, I don't want people to think that behind their backs we've gone and done something.
Yeah, just to confirm, Chair, is that actually part of the recommendation, or is that within the body of the report?
Well, it's in the body. Sorry, 6.2, James.
Okay, so if it's in the body of the report, I mean, it won't actually affect the recommendation, so unless Helen thinks anything different, I'd suggest the recommendation stands as drafted.
What I don't want to do is to stand up at Council next week to oppose it, simply to change a word, that's all, which I think I need to do. Helen?
I can get the wording amended if it would make you feel better, but in terms of the recommendations would stand.
Well, thank you very much. And this won't happen anyway. Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Just for clarification, this is probably something I probably ought to know already. Do we actually have an appointed Vice Chair of Gas?
I was going to come on to that. We haven't. But this won't happen anyway until after May. All right, Helen, but it's not going to happen before the May elections. It's just to get the agreement of Council.
So that's for next year's committee to worry about.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, can we note this, members? Yeah. I say Council next week anyway. Thank you very much. Thank you. Item 11 is the exclusion of public and the press. The usual bit where we've got the confidential papers and then we've got the other Richard's other report. So can we, if members have anything to say on the exempt report, we'd have to go into exempt session. Is that agreed? Okay, thank you very much. Richard, this is now procurement management information, item 12.
Thank you, Chair. So in terms of the report, it follows the same structure as last time against the 3 main monitoring elements, spend compliance, awards via waiver and performance monitoring. In terms of spend compliance, we are achieving a 99% compliance level with transactions that are wholly processed through Fusion being tracked to contracts on intent, which is helping massively with our transparency obligations. We're now starting to look at other areas of spend that we process via other systems. So we're now able to report on levels of spend that are going through, for instance, Controc, with adult social care payments, Mosaic, payments that are related to private sector, housing, disabled facilities, grant refurbs, all that type of thing as well. So we are now moving into that, and there's a level of analysis that I've undertaken in the exempt report, but at the moment, whilst we've got some work to make sure we get contracts up on the system, and there doesn't appear to be any instances of any sort of high risk breaches of regulations at first glance, but further work to be undertaken there that we'll be doing in the next few months. Any questions on that, Chair, before I move on to the next part of the report? Would
you finish the
finish
white
report in
bits?
total?
If you finish that bit, and then members can ask questions. Yeah. Okay, thanks, Richard.
Moving on to award via waiver. Again, compared to where we were a couple of years ago, even a year ago, when we were having high instances of waivers, which was driven by the need to, first of all, react to the pandemic, and then to deal with the backlog of work that was created by the pandemic, which drove a lot of waiver requests. We're now getting much more back to pre-pandemic levels of waivers. So we had 8 in the last quarter that we reported. We've got 9 in this quarter. Value has gone up, but most of that value is actually in respect of low-risk waivers where there isn't a breach of statutory threshold. So we've departed from our own rules, but we're not doing anything unlawful. We don't have any high-risk waivers where we've breached statutory requirements and we don't have a means of mitigation or a means of bringing it into compliance. And then in terms of the contract management, we are going to, from April, effectively remove the existing KPI model, which has those 3 KPIs, which, as I've reported to committee previously, they're not fit for purpose anymore. They haven't been reviewed for some time, and people aren't completing them. So we're getting rid of them. We're going to have one single KPI that can be applied to all contracts, and that will also have consistent business rules. So we will set when KPIs are applied and frequencies, rather than potentially ending up with a bit of a free-for-all where it makes it very hard to give consistent information back to committee. And that will be rolled out from April. We'll focus on those big contracts to begin with, so the highways PFI, the term service contracts we have with our repair and maintenance contractors. Then we move down to the next level of contracts, and we're thinking that within 6 months, I'd hope earlier than that, we will have completely removed the old KPI system, and we're thinking down to contracts with a value of £100,000. We will have consistent KPI measures across all of those. We're not considering going below the £100,000 because in reality we don't often have a contract below that value. More often than not it will be done on a purchase order set of terms, and it's at the £100,000 where our legal colleagues get involved in sealing and executing contracts. So that's the current thought process, but we will review that as we roll out. In terms of instances of any poor performance, and we've had no red KPIs, I will caveat though by saying that we don't have great levels of reporting back, which we will address with the new system, but we don't have any red KPIs. One amber KPI, which doesn't appear to be anything of great significance. I can provide more information in the exempt session if needed, but it's not due to a contract service level not being met. It's more in terms of the administration of the contract and information being provided in line with timescales. And that concludes the public section of the report, Chair.
Okay, Richard, thank you very much. Thank you. Members, any questions or points on the bits that are in the public domain? No, okay, so are there any points on the exempt report, in which case we'd have to go into exempt session? I'm not saying there shouldn't be, but I mean, it's just that the microphones will need to be turned off. Are you happy with that? Members happy with that? Can we note the whole report? Okay? Yeah? Yeah, thank you very much, members. Richard, thank you very much for that. Okay. I think that concludes our meeting. That concludes the last Governance and Audit for this municipal year. I thank you all very much for your participation, and good luck to everybody come May, although I don't think any of us are standing, but thank you all very much. Thank you.